I invite Professor Edison Castrillon, Professor Claudia Marcela Suescún. I invite Professor Viviana Nieto to turn on their cameras, please. Very good. Excellent. Welcome to our talk, Literacy in the Language Classroom, a space created by Licenciatura en Lenguas Extranjeras con énfasis en inglés en coordinación de graduados and promoción empresarial to offer our students, alumni, and teachers in general the possibility of strengthening their knowledge about writing and reading processes in the English classroom, literacy, from pertinent and contemporary possessions. Today, we are going to be listening and talking to two of our faculty members who are passionate about literacy and have been studying and shaping their teaching scenarios. I would like to welcome our first guest, Claudia Marcela Suescún Giraldo. Professor Claudia Suescún holds a BA in Educación Básica con énfasis en inglés, a postgraduate study in Docencia Investigativa Universitaria, a Magister on Neuropsicopedagogía. Thank you, Claudia, for being here with us. Our second guest is Edison F. Castrillon Ángel. Professor Edison Castrillon holds a postgraduate study in English teaching and a Magister on Procesos de Aprendizaje y Enseñanza de Segundas Lenguas. Thank you, Edison, for sharing your knowledge with our community. I would like to welcome Viviana Fernanda Nieto Padilla from Graduados and Promoción Empresarial to greet our audience today. Viviana, estamos listos para tu saludo.
Muchísimas gracias, Claudia, y a todos los que nos están acompañando esta noche, bienvenidos. Es un placer contar con ustedes. Como ya lo mencionó Claudia, yo hago el acompañamiento esta noche a este evento tan importante desde la coordinación de graduados. Para todos nosotros, los graduados son un factor y un pilar importantísimo en nuestra universidad, entonces nos complace muchísimo que este tipo de eventos sean de su gusto. Por eso, de una forma muy respetuosa, los invito a que finalizando la charla, diligencien el link que les voy a compartir por el chat, donde podrán diligenciar, obviamente, la asistencia y haremos la evaluación del evento. Es muy importante conocer su opinión acerca de qué tipo de charlas y eventos están ustedes interesados y necesitados para complementar su formación una vez han sido graduados y también estudiantes de último semestre, que son nuestro público objetivo. Entonces, de verdad, agradezco que nos diligencien esta encuesta, que es muy corta, pero que nos dará muy buenos insumos para el desarrollo de nuestro trabajo. De igual forma, las personas que diligencien esta encuesta, les compartiremos la grabación y las presentaciones de la profesora Claudia y del profesor Edison. Así que muchas gracias por esta noche estar acompañándonos y espero que podamos seguir en un contacto muy fluido con todos nuestros graduados. Muchas gracias, Claudia, por darme este espacio.
Viviana, muchas gracias por tu saludo de bienvenida. En este momento tenemos más de 70 personas, algunos son estudiantes de nuestro programa, otros son graduados y algunos son profesores en general de nuestra comunidad. Todos ustedes son supremamente bienvenidos a crear comunidad de práctica con nosotros. Before starting, it is important to remind our audience that for questions and comments, you can use our chat. During the meeting, we will be sharing the attendance sheet, as Viviana told you, so your participation is registered. And after the event, the video will be posted and shared with you. Let's start with our first speaker, Professor Claudia Suescún, and her talk entitled Cognition and Literacy, What We Know. Claudia Marcela, more than welcome. We are really pleased to have you here. I strongly recommend all our community to have the cameras off and the mics off. When we have the spaces for communication and sharing questions, we will invite you to have them open. Okay, Claudia, as we say, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia, so much. Thank you, dear colleagues, dear students, fellow graduates, and all of you present for accompanying us. I will very much try to keep my presentation short because this, more than providing information for you, let's say new information, it's to invite you to reflect on how do we integrate all of the different cognitive functions that are implied in reading and writing, okay? Particularly when we read and write in a foreign language. Okay, so first I would like to start with talking about what we know. Okay, what do we know? On which brain area or brain function do we need to read and write? Okay, so comments are welcome. Either you can turn on your microphone and share it with us, or you can write it in the chat if you liked. Okay, so which do you think? Which area or of the brain, or which brain function do we have active when we are reading and writing? Okay, so we have Wernicke and Broca's areas. Okay, Wernicke's area that has to do with comprehension, with language comprehension. Yes, that is true. Okay, any other? Juan Carlos?
Teacher, I think we need all the brain about the areas, because if you don't have any specific area, the whole brain fail. And in that moment, you will be different aspect in your body that fall, thinking, movements, or aspects about the anatomy in the body.
Exactly. So we have answers here in the chat, like the left hemisphere, Broca's area, the frontal lobe, parietal, temporal. But actually, Juan Carlos stole, well, not stole, told us the answer. Okay, so all of the brain and all of its areas are involved when we read and write. We're going to take a look at how some of those areas are involved and what will be their particular function, but not taking a look from the biology of the brain, but from the functions that we consider basic and higher mental functions. So let's begin with a consideration of the basic functions. Okay, so here we have little Dexter accompanying us, one of my favorite cartoons. Okay, so we start with the basic functions, which are three: perception, attention, memory. Perception is necessary because, of course, when we read or when we write, all of the senses are involved. Okay, so not only the visual, but also our hearing and our hearing cortex in the brain are involved. Okay, because of something, because of a concept that you might know, which is the phonological awareness, which is that capacity that we have to transform written text into speech, but this happens inside our brain. Okay, so that is the let's say the little voice that we hear in our heads when we are reading something. I don't know if it happens to you, but well, it's natural that it happens, and when we read something, we listen to it in our brain. This is the phonological awareness in action. Also, when we write, of course, we require motor skills, and motor skills are also required of the senses, particularly of the touch, okay? And particularly something that is called the proprioception. Okay, proprioception, some of you who maybe attended my Asacopy lecture a couple of weeks ago, proprioception is that ability to identify your own body through touch. Okay, so what happens? Put your hands behind your back, okay? I did this exercise also a couple of weeks ago in Asacopy's lecture. And can you touch? Can you touch your index to your thumb without being able to see them? Of course you can. If you can, well, we need to pay attention to that. Okay, but that proprioception is fundamental when we grab something to write with. Now, we have attention too, okay? And we have two types of attention when it comes to reading and writing. We have divided attention, we have sustained attention. And a lot of people say, but why divided attention? Because we sometimes, when we are reading, we are thinking about something else. I like this. Why is this character doing this in this text? Or why is this information provided here and contradicting something that was already said? So our attention, even though our eyes are on the text, our perception is focused on the text, our brain is not working with sustained attention. Maybe there are times in which sustained attention is there, okay, because we are just reading or going through a text, particularly when we are skimming, okay, sustained attention happens there because we will be reading through the text very quickly. So this requires sustained attention. But when we question the text, when we ask ourselves, why is this happening here, or this is a contradicting idea, or this is something that I didn't know, this is your divided attention at work. Also, when we are scanning, okay, when we are scanning, our sustained attention is even higher because we are looking for a particular detail. Okay, so this requires a little bit more of sustained attention. Now, we also have memory involved in reading and writing processes. Why? Because we connect what we know to our previous knowledge. And this goes in two categories. In the semantic categories, so we can recognize the words that we are reading, but also our episodic memory, meaning the memory that we have related to our own lives and the experiences that we've had. Okay, the episodic memory also allows us to make connections. When you are rereading a text, when you are revisiting that old friend that you like very much, our episodic memory is also in action. Why? Because we are remembering not just the time, not only that we are reading now, okay, but you also connect to what you felt, to what you thought, to the analysis that you made when you were reading that story for the first time. So notice that all three basic functions are involved in reading. Now, what about the higher functions that these are a little bit more, right? So we have noticias. So we have, again, Dexter here, but with a lot of more information, visual information around it. Okay, so what happens here? Dexter is with a community. I made and I chose this particular image for this slide because when we have higher functions because we interact with each other, because we are not alone, isolated individuals, but we are in constant interaction. This is what allows us to have or to develop higher functions. Now, noticias are previous information that we analyze. So, of course, when we are reading and when we are writing, we are developing those noticias a little bit more. Okay, so noticias are also connected to what I told you earlier regarding episodic and semantic memory, but this is a little bit more connected to that semantic memory. Okay, we are able, let's say, to read a full text because we know most of the words that are there. Okay, and this is something that we need to also to practice and to tell our students and to make our students very much aware that when they are reading a text, we normally stop at a word that we don't know. Okay, this is only natural. Okay, because when we encounter things that we do not know, of course, we're going to stop to take a look. But most of the time, this creates certain degree of frustration. Like, I don't understand one or two or three words, so I'm not going to understand the text. There are always going to be words that we do not know because of whatever reason. Okay, but there is always, at least when we have um, achieved certain degree of reading fluency, there is going to be more words that we know than the ones that we do not know. Now, we also develop praxias, okay, which are the acquired motor skills. This comes particularly handy when it comes to writing, okay, or even more when we are typing, okay. So when we are typing after we become familiar with the keyboard, okay, so this is a praxia, okay, because we know where our fingers should go to find certain letters. Of course, when reading and writing, there is also language involved, which is another higher mental function. And you can tell me, but animals have language too. Yes, but not the complexity, the complex system, the complex linguistic system that we have. That includes aspects like phonetics, because as I told you, because of the phonological awareness, that includes semantics, because we need to know the meaning of the words, but it also includes pragmatics. Okay, so with pragmatics, what do? We are adapting and identifying um, social experiences, political perspectives. So we are identifying all of the aspects that the words themselves cannot give us. We also have executive functions at work when we are reading or writing. Why? Because we need to plan. This is, of course, a little bit more, um, a little stronger when it comes to writing, when we have um, to plan a text, okay? But also reasoning, decision making, evaluating are things that we constantly do when we are reading. Again, when it comes to going back to to attention, okay? When we are saying like, I hadn't analyzed this before, or I didn't know about this idea. What are we doing there? We are evaluating the text. So our executive functions are uh, playing a very significant role here. We also have the higher function of intelligence working here, and not because of the complexity of the text, okay? Uh, but intelligence is not for you to know a lot of words or to know a lot of technicalities. No, okay? Intelligence is the capacity that you have to adapt to new situations. This is also strongly connected to executive functions, because what happens when we read something that we do not agree with? Okay, so we have two options. We can just ignore and try to put that under the rug, or we can adapt to that new idea without necessarily agreeing to it. Okay, so this is intelligence at work. Okay, so that capacity that we have to adapt to new situations is something that is very present when we read or when we write. Social cognition as well, because our ability to empathize to characters, to the position of an author, to the information that we are receiving or that we are producing in a text, this is what we call social cognition. Okay? And last but not least, this is fundamental. This is one of the most fundamental higher function when it comes to reading and writing is the visual spatial abilities. And what are these? These are mental representations of the things that we do not have in front of us. Okay, so you open a text, you open a book, okay, and you start reading, okay, and let's say that you are reading something of a medieval adventure, okay, so you in your head you start imagining the shields, the swords, the crossbows, the armor of the warriors, and everything. So this is a mental representation that is given because of your visual spatial abilities. One of the most fantastic things that we have, okay, the access also. Thank you, Oscar. One of the greatest things that these abilities allow us to do is that we have the ability to play with those in our brain. Okay, so not only that we are capable of representing what we are reading, but we also can play with this in our brain. So we can imagine a different ending. We can have two characters with with a different interaction than the one they gave in the book. So that those visual spatial abilities are fundamental when it comes to creative processes because they give you, as I said before, that ability to represent objects in your mind and to play with them. Now, let me give you like some research. Okay, this is just a little bit of research to reading and writing. So, so we have that there is extensive activation of both hemispheres when we are reading or writing, both. Okay, so mostly in the literature we find it related to reading. Okay, but this also happens when we are writing. There are predictors that you can have, like phonological memory, cognitive and visual processing. So as I told you, and as I said before, those visual spatial abilities are fundamental when it comes to reading and to writing. And I'm sorry, something that I missed, okay, is that visual spatial abilities are also fundamental when it comes to writing because normally, when we write, are you able to see what you're writing? Not exactly. Okay, so you have to picture the letter in your hand and do it. This happens especially at early stages of writing development. Okay, so we know that a child is becoming a little bit more proficient in writing when they are able to write the letter without necessarily having to look at a sample in a board or in a book. Okay, so when they have that mental ability to represent letters, okay, these are visual spatial abilities at work. Okay, so all of these predictors have a certain value or a certain degree of explaining how well children can do. So that means that visual processing needs to be trained in order to develop reading fluency and writing fluency as well. We have Rosalie Matute Ardila, who also said that reading speed correlates with attentional skills, as we said before. So this is one of the basic abilities, and reading comprehension with verbal memory. Okay, because our ability to comprehend a text also has to do with the verbal memory and with the semantic memory that we have. Okay, also, okay, we need to consider, as I told you before, when I told you about language, the pragmatics of language. Okay, the pragmatics of language, because reading, as Dehaene says, is more than putting words together, but also deriving meaning from that. Okay, so meaning is not only semantics. Okay, so including pragmatic elements in the reading comprehension activities that we have for our students from early stages is going to develop the reading comprehension and the reading fluency much faster. Because think about this, most of the time when we work reading activities, particularly with our children, we we rarely or almost never work the pragmatical component. We tend to ask very literal questions. Okay, so what happened with the boy, or what color was the house of the main character, or things like this. I'm not saying that is not important because, of course, this is a stage of reading development that we need to consider and that we need to adapt, but also including small pragmatical units in those reading activities for children is going to be of great value for the reading development. Finally, Reading skills are mainly located in the left hemisphere. So somebody said earlier, okay, that reading and writing had to do with the left hemisphere. Yes, absolutely. Okay, mostly as this author said, Puente Ferreras, mainly located in the left hemisphere because we have pattern recognition. Okay, so stimulating pattern recognition in tests is a very good idea to develop reading fluency and reading comprehension. However, we cannot disregard the right hemisphere, the creative processes that accompany reading and writing. All right, so what does this imply? So I have three major implications for you to think about today. First is one that you may have seen already. Okay, so can somebody dare to read that? And I see Juan Carlos trying very hard to read there.
May I?
Of course.
Reading in a very complicated font or color can be really challenging.
And how easy was that to read? Sorry.
Especially after 40.
For me, it's that, you know why? Because I write in different colors, so I think my brain is used to this. Yes, and because I'm wearing my glasses.
No, but even for me, well, this is actually worrying me because even with my glasses on, I find it very, very difficult. Okay, so it's lovely. It's lovely to when we have texts from our students, the discomfort is evident. Okay, so it's lovely when we have these very decorated notebooks from our students with pink and yellow and light blue and light green. Okay, but this is one of those implications. What does this imply? Okay, this difficulty to read this text, which function, either basic or higher, is at work here and is having problems with this? Which do you think? Do you think that this will be related to memory, for example?
No, I think it's about the spectrum.
And this has to do with which?
The light in the eyes, about around the
Okay,
brain.
Juana already answered. Thank you, Juana. This is affecting our perception. Okay, so this is the very first thing that we need to think about when we handle reading and writing activities in our classrooms. Why? Because if the very first step for us to read, which is perception, which is that ability for our senses to detect what is there, if it's having problems, then the rest of the processes are going to have problems. Okay, now let's think about this second implication. Can somebody dare to read it aloud?
Yeah, the words are misspelled. Yes, some of them are misspelled.
But
there
if
was
you
one.
were
But more than misspelled, they are scrambled.
Exactly. But can you read it? Can you understand
Yeah,
what is
of course. Because the first syllable and the last are in the right place.
Mm-hmm. And which of our cognitive abilities allow us to read this? Even with the scrambled letters in those words. Okay, Juana, yes, you are right. Memory. Okay, a proxy will be if we were writing it. Okay, so being teachers also, of course, being teachers for a long time. So we have memory and notes yet there. Okay, why memory? Because this is addressed in our semantic memory that we know that powerful is a word that we know practiced is a verb and it has these characteristics and it is spelled this way. Okay. Identify also, okay, even though the words are scrambled, you can read this paragraph without a lot of trouble. Okay, so even if we were not teachers. Now, let's take a look at this one. What is that about? It's funny. Well, students do not, and we can leave that for the question session, Roger, because students do have issues identifying cursive, but because of a particular reason. Okay, so we can talk about this in the question section. Now, what about this third term, this third paragraph? Any thoughts or any opinions there? In simple terms, Juana, what do you think that is said there?
I'm just joking because it starts with in simple terms, so it's like, oh, no way.
Exactly. So what happens there? Which cognitive functions are having a hard time for us? Okay, attention, perhaps, but let's say that the difficulty in attention, but this will be because I mean, I don't want to pay attention to this, but why? Intelligence, we are trying, yes, to adapt to these new concepts that we have, but we're having difficulty also because of a particular issue. Noticias in a way, because noticias are developed from this process. Well, memory, very good, Christian. Okay, because our semantic memory, our declarative memory, is not familiar with not just a few, but with most of the content words in this text. Okay, because we might know what a quantum system is. Okay, but we have something called vector space, okay, and state space, and Euclidean. Well, I think most of us, okay. Social cognition can also be related, but because of the field where we move. Okay, so this is I asked a friend of mine to briefly describe what is a quantum system. Okay, he's a very good systems engineer. Okay, but I bet that if he reads, let's say a book or a text that is trying um, to distinguish what are the differences between evaluation, assessment, and testing, that he will have a difficult time there. Okay, so because he will be confused with terms of like a instrument, evaluating instrument, or what is an integral assessment, okay, or other things that are in our particular jargon. But because of the particular context in which we move, some of these words are not we are not familiar with. Okay, so this will have several implications. Number one, our attention span is going to have certain limits. Okay, so if we want to continue reading texts like this, we need to make a very strong cognitive effort. Okay, so think also about the texts that you are selecting for your students. Okay, how many unfamiliar words do we have? So this is the reason why a lot of teachers, they have let's say a vocabulary building before reading a text. Okay, so they are familiar with enough words from the text, or that is also why there are plenty of texts, particularly the readers that we have for our classrooms, that come with a glossary. Okay, and it is to avoid this type of situations. This also has an effect on notesias, because these are not words that are, because these are words that are not familiar with us and that we're not going to use uh, a lot of times. So our notesias are not going to be developed regarding this topic. Okay, so this is the final reflection that I wanted to leave for you. So what kind of text are we choosing for students? What kind of font that addresses their perceptions? What kind of words do we have there? What kind of topics, okay, do we have there, so they can be associated with previous experiences, with the social context in which we are, so they can continue developing their social cognition? I mean, this is not about selecting texts that are completely or that are 100% familiar with the contents of the students, but that are close enough so we can start expanding that social cognition, that adaptability to new situations. Okay, so these implications can, well, or I hope that make us think about what are we giving our students to read, what kind of assignments are we giving them to write, and how do we develop all of those functions that we had, that we talked about today, in an integral and fluid way. So Roger says that is why we must reinvent ourselves day to day and contextualize with them. Okay, exactly right, Roger, because let's say that the more students can relate with a text, the more attention they're going to pay to it, because also, let's say, our attention abilities are associated or are very linked in our brain to our motivations and our preferences, our likes and dislikes. Okay, so when we dislike something very much, okay, so if you come to me today and you tell me, Marce, you have to read the Popol Vuh, I will say no, thank you. I already had that experience. I had to read it, but I'm not going to repeat it. Okay, so, and why am I not? Okay, and if I, let's say, if I have to read it again, if I am forced to read it again for whatever reason, I am going to have a very difficult time, but because I know that this is something that I dislike, so my attention is going to be compromised there. All right, so that was it from this part. Thank you very much. Are there any quick questions or comments?
I don't know, Claudia, if you want to address to what Roger was saying about cursive handwriting and cursive font.
All right, so cursive handwriting is becoming less and less popular in schools. Okay, so this is a fact. What do we associate our visual cortex with? And okay, let's keep in mind that our visual cortex is one of the strongest cortex and one of the strongest abilities that we develop, but because they are one of the first abilities that we develop in our brain. Okay, the visual cortex is right here. Okay, it's in the back of our head, and our brain starts being the last areas of the brain to be myelinized and develop are is the prefrontal cortex, where we handle our executive functions. Okay, so what happens? Our visual cortex is mostly developed in during childhood. So when we are not exposed enough to cursive letter, that visual cortex, if a child is exposed to cursive writing later on in his life, let's say after 5 or 6 that the visual cortex starts or gets fully myelinized, okay, that child is going to have very significant problems. Okay, so because the habit of cursing, of writing in cursive letter is being used less and less in our schools, this is the reason why children at an early age are not exposed to them, and they do not recognize this kind of handwriting later on in their life.
Thank you, Claudia. I don't know, we could have like 5 minutes if someone has a specific question related to what you were sharing today.
Juana.
Well, I really don't know if my question is really related to this, but I have heard in different places that when you are like learning English for the kids, that they need to write with pen. They say always like in English we write with pen, and I have heard that in like different institutions now, and I was wondering if it has like a neurobiological reason there or why.
Well, there are a strong sorry, my apologies, my constant companion is here. There is a lot of research regarding the development of our brain through writing, okay, through handwriting. This is fundamental because we are developing so many functions where we are handwriting, because as I told you, we are developing our proprioception, we are developing our visual spatial skills, okay, we are developing praxias, we are developing noxias, okay, so there are many functions that are involved when it comes to handwriting, okay, so these are functions and brain areas that are being stimulated when we handwrite. Perhaps, and this is just a hypothesis, this is just like Marcela Suescún hypothesis, right? That writing in ink allows us to perceive the space or to perceive the letter a little bit more clearly than when we write with pencil. It could be, it's just a hypothesis. I will have to look it up and get back to you.
Thank you very much. I was wondering what is really the difference. Why in English must it be with ink and not with pencil? Thanks.
We continue with Roger.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to relate the same question. At my school, I remember that we would always teach them to write the titles in red and then in blue and black. And now they said it becomes an obstacle because students are not learning the same way, and that the process gets like limited when they have to change their pen and we have to change pencil and stuff. What can you enlighten us with that?
Well, I mean, when we have different titles with different colors, okay, and this was, let's say, very much encouraged in the past, we have different semantic categories developing there. Okay, so these are the words that go into the title. This is, let's say, to put it in a way, a general idea. Okay, and this is like the development of that idea. So perhaps it is about making those compartments, okay, and analyzing information differently when it's in the title or when it's in the rest of the text, okay? Or it also might be a metacognitive strategy, okay, for our students to know when does a text or a particular section finish and where does the next one begin, so they can find information easier. So it might be one of those two.
We continue with, we have 3 more questions, and after those questions, we go to listen to Professor Edison F. So Álvaro, please.
Okay, Profe, Professor Claudia, nice to meet you again. So beautiful, as always.
Alvarito, so nice to hear you.
Glorita también está allí.
Alvarito, how nice to see you again.
Glad to see you.
Alvarito, the way that we say it in Spanish, alborotaste este gallinero.
Prof, in my first observation, a practical observation, the school that I was sent was to Jeremy Parres in Belen, Jeremy Parres, and they had a class there in the 5th grade where the kids have a calligraphy class, a calligraphy. And the guys and the kids who can write down with the right hand, they're supposed to write down the calligraphy with the left hand. And I was surprised how easily the kids could absorb that exercise. And some of them, they go a little up, they have a line, they have a special notebook with lines, and they have sizes. You know, they cannot go one step up or one step down. They have to keep themselves in one line. And they were doing very well. And this was part of the school program, calligraphy with the steady. They can do it with the left and the right hand at the same time. Mm-hmm. Is that any benefit to it for the kids on the 5th grade?
This is fantastic brain gym. This is a great brain gym because when it comes to motor skills, our left hemisphere handles all of our right movements and our right side motor skills and motor abilities. And on the other hand, okay, our right hemisphere handles everything, coordination, motor, gross and fine motor skills of our left side, the left side of our brain. So when we have the ability to write with both hands, or to do things, not just writing with both hands, we are giving our brain a little boost. Okay, so this is a great exercise for our brain.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Now we continue with Gloria and then Laura. I know we have a lot of questions. This is amazing, but we have to listen to Professor Edison Fernay. Okay?
Okay. I was just going to say something regarding the use of cursive and the use of colors. I guess it's not so much about the literacy, but about other types of abilities, right? When children write the titles in one color and the text in another color, what we are teaching them is how to categorize information. Like what is the main information and what is the information that depends on that title. So they know that what is in red is like a big category and what is in black is a smaller category. So we are helping them classify information. And I need to say that I think cursive has been reduced drastically because teachers don't know how to write cursive, so they evade it. I'm sorry. The point is, when we write with cursive, and I have talked about it with some of the graduates that we have here, when we write in cursive, we are helping our students see words as one unit, as one concept, and not 5 or 6 or 7 concepts, right? And that can be helpful for them to identify, for example, the word house in cursive is 1 meaning unit, but in a script, it is 5 meaning units. But as teachers don't know how to write in cursive and they don't practice with cursive, then it has been dramatically reduced. I would recommend trying to, if you are interested working with preschool, 1st grade, like learn how to write in cursive and practice your cursive, right? Maybe with this year that we have been learning remotely, we may use more these resources when we come back to the schools, but there is going to be a moment in which we are going to use the blackboard or the whiteboard or something, and it would be good that we help our students with cursive letter, handwriting, I mean.
That is right, Gloria. And you have a lot of research supporting that, because the benefits of cursive writing are backed up by research that allows not only for those units, for those meaning units, but also for the for the development of fluid thinking.
Thank you, Gloria, for your comment. So we continue with Laura Cárdenas. Sorry, my camera was off.
Hello.
Laura, hello.
Hi. Okay, regarding to the brain development, I don't know if it's a question or Claudia can help me out to understand how my baby brain works. She is 2 years old, and thanks to the pandemic, she's been exposed to English for every day since last year, 8 hours a day, even more because I work in the afternoons on Saturdays, and she doesn't speak yet. I mean, she says a few words, but I can really say that she is willing to pronunciate easier English than Spanish. So for instance, she doesn't say sí, she says yay. So she doesn't say what other she says agua, but if I say water, she says water. But I'm trying to speak more Spanish to her, but she is willing more to speak in English. So I don't know.
Well, she is developing something fantastic that is developed particularly at this age. That is a concept I already introduced, which is the phonological awareness. Because as you pointed out, she's being exposed to so many hours during the day, and during her waking hours, she's listening to English constantly. Okay, so she is developing that phonological awareness earlier. Okay, and during this period of time that we call the critical language developing period, she's being exposed to this. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. There have been studies in which children who grew up with both languages in their households with let's say unequal measures, okay, because of course if there is a higher measure of a particular language, that is going to be the one that they are going to develop their phonological awareness mostly in, okay, but when we have both languages in equal measures, that will be, let's say, my only suggestion for you, that if you want her to develop both languages, try to measure up how much interaction does she have with both languages. I know that it's hard because right now that we are working from home, well, they are listening to us speak English all day, basically. Okay, but in your interactions with her, do not prohibit English, but talk to her in Spanish as much as you can with her, because she's already listening to you speaking English for a considerable amount of time. I would like to.
Thank you so much.
There was a comment, I don't know if you want to answer, but somebody was asking if teachers are being trained in cursive writing while studying to be teachers. Mm-hmm.
This is purely individual development right now.
It could happen if the students go to escuelas normales, superiores, but if you go to the university and you were not part of escuela superior normal, right? Or if in your high school they didn't do it, no, okay? There is an amazing booklet that is called Método Palmer de Escritura Cursiva, and that is amazing. I'm sorry, Claudia, that I just jumped.
No, don't worry. I actually wanted to address Christian's questions. He said, I was wondering if everyone has that visual spatial skills, or there people who just have a better development of it. Okay, so this, because Carol backs him up, this, as any other brain function, is enhanced through practice and through the amount of interaction that we have, and how much do we use these abilities in our daily lives. Okay, so same as there are people who have amazing mnemonic or memory processes, or that can sustain their attention for longer than most, or that have higher degrees of adaptability to new situations or a higher degree of empathy with others. Okay, so this all of the beautiful thing about the brain is that it can be enhanced and it can be improved through most of the things that we do every day.
Thank you, Claudia. So far, I'm going to close the questions session, right? And we really appreciate all these contributions that you have shared with us so far today. Our second guest is Edison F. Castrillon Ángel. Professor Edison Castrillon holds a postgraduate study in English teaching and a magister on procesos de aprendizaje y enseñanza de segundas lenguas. Thank you, Edison, for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Always is a pleasure. Always is a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, of course. And thank you so much to everybody, to our students, and for the people who is coming here. I know that we have even people from Brazil, and we have some guests, interesting guests here, join us with this interesting conversation. So let me share my screen right now. Can you see my screen?
Perfectly.
Okey-dokey. Okay, guys. So at the first time, I really want to talk a little while about CDL, about critical digital literacy. In a praxis, we are going to try to discuss this as a praxis with pre-service English teachers, but also with graduate students too. Yes. During this event that we called Literacy in the Language Classroom, I really appreciate the contribution that Professor Suescún did, because we cannot separate the cognitive processes to the social processes. And in that way, I really want to continue talking a little while about that cognitive processes, but also taking into consideration those social practices, even literacy as a social practice, literacy as another way of reading and writing our word in our words. Yes. Before starting, I really want to declare something. I declare as a Colombian boy my disagreement with the new tax reform and an action that should not happen if the government had a good management of public resources. I really invite you to continue reading and writing the history we want for our country. I think that this is very important, taking a while for reflecting about these practices, because this is another way of reading and writing our word. Yes, this is a phenomena that is happening nowadays, and of course we need to apply our educational perspectives, in our views, in our ways of reading and writing, and of course we need to face this situation too. So before starting, for starting perfect, I really want to talk a little while about what is alphabetization in what is the contribution of alphabetization in literacy, because there are a lot of discussions. Yes. For example, if we talk a little while about those perspectives about alphabetization, that is the way of encoding and decoding words in writing and reading, but maybe here as the UNESCO and as Freire, Soria, and Araya said and established, this process is more regarding to a process for decoding or and decoding the word. And also here, guys, I really want to clarify something, because one of the most relevant influencers in this process was our friend Pablo Freire, who determined that also we need to read and write our words from a critical perspective, from a freedom perspective, and of course, we need to determine how reading and writing transforms ourselves, but also our communities. From that perspective, there are a lot of authors, there are a lot of authors that have contributed a little while about this contribution. For example, nowadays we have Kazani, who said that we need to go beyond the word, and we need to go beyond and looking for a different perspective, and we need to analyze how the writing and the reading could transform ourselves. In other words that we have, for example, here in a local area, is the word, for example, for Mora and Cañas, who determine, for example, that literacy could be understood as a social practice, but also as a possibility of reading our cities, reading our context, and reading our perspectives. And talking a little while, for example, about another perspective in the Brazilian arena, we could determine, for example, Rojo, who said that this discussion about literacy goes beyond that practice of decoding or indicating the word. So this is my first presentation. Try to clarify my first slide. Try to clarify to you what is alphabetization and what is literacy, and maybe a little while that difference that we need to consider for understanding this field of literacy in the way I want to present to you. Yes, because even the UNESCO determined that a person could be or could be determined as an alphabetized person when he or she minimum has the ability to write their names. But in that way, obviously, we determine that it's not just writing our names or reading our names, but also we need going beyond about that specific perspective. So nowadays, we could determine, for example, that reading and writing, it's a social practice. Yes, it's a social practice that help us to understand our political system, maybe our society, our situations, and through that reading and writing processes, we could analyze and interpret our society, our words. Yes, so that is the first thing that I want to share with you, that is reading and writing is the possibility of understanding and in transforming and taking action about our words. So here, as Meneses 2013 said, literacy is not just knowing how to read and write, it is knowing how to deal with information in different formats, taking into account the context. Yeah, because even nowadays we receive a lot of information from different sources, but it's our role determining how are we going to deal with that information that we receive every single day, Yes, in the other hand, for example, we could determine reading and writing as a social practice is also knowing how to read a newspaper or knowing how to differentiate, to make the difference about, for example, how to read a newspaper is different from knowing how to read a traffic sign or a legal contract. Yes, because now we could read different signs, different phenomena in different perspectives, in different situations. And it's our role, is start understanding that social practice can give us the possibility of reading in a different way, and reading even the society, even reading, for example, the protest that we had yesterday and we are having right now. Yeah, why we are going to the street and why we are facing this new situation. So we need to start thinking twice, the way of that we are reading and writing. And also here, we could determine how writing and reading is used in different ways by certain communities in certain contexts, because maybe reading and writing for a particular, or maybe yes, reading and writing for a particular contest could be different than reading and writing, yes, for another one. Yes, because it depends on the themes and the interpretation for every single contest. Maybe for me, reading this situation that we are facing nowadays is different the way that I can interpret if I could ask for another person. So through that reading and writing process, we have different perspectives and different points of view from different people and from different contests and from different purposes. So here, with that different perspectives, we need to determine that words that is literacies, because we are facing different ways of reading. Yes, we are facing different ways of reading and writing our words. And it depends the ability that we have, for example, as a person, because there are a lot of people, for example, that pretends that everybody read and write in the same way, but we have different abilities, different purposes, different practices, and in that way, we develop different purposes. We develop different ways of reading and writing our word. And in that way, it's very important to determine that there are a lot of ways of reading and writing different phenomena, different situations. For example, it is not the same if you are reading, for example, the farmer that is, or you as a teacher are reading, for example, the farmer situation in this moment. For example, if you are planting, or if you are planting a tree, maybe for you as a teacher, you could have a different perspective about how to do that. But maybe the farmer could have that literacy in a very specific way, and he could contribute in a very good way because he has that knowledge. So that information that person has help him for doing that specific activity in a perfect way. It is not the same, for example, in this moment, if I know how to sing and I know how to interpret maybe music, letter, something like that, yes, maybe that is my ability for developing that specific phenomenon. Yes, I have the ability of doing that activity, but it's because I have a behavior for interpreting and doing that specific things. It is not the same, for example, it is not the same if I go to the farm, and I start doing a lot of things. For me, it's kind of difficult to develop that specific actions because I don't have the capacity of reading and writing that situation in that perfect way. And when we are talking here about literacy, it is because we expand our perspective. We expand the possibilities of reading and writing, and maybe the ways and the abilities that we have for doing different activities throughout that process of reading and writing. Yes, because when you have the capacity of reading and writing, you could transform, but that reading and writing could happen in different scenarios, in different events. Yes, so when we are talking here about that different ways, we could determine, as a brief, we could determine here that literacy could be understood, or literacy is that importance of going beyond the word to understand the words, what is 2003, but also it gave us the possibility of reading and writing for empower ourselves. And in that way, we could have a very critical perspective, and we could determine the critical literacy. And what could we do with that critical literacy, guys? We could say that critical literacy is not just reading and writing, for in every single situations, when every single events, but also we write in a critical way, yes, and it is a social practice that interrogates with the culture, the ideology, the knowledge, and the power of each being. Let's make a parenthesis here. Literacy gives us the possibility of writing and reading, yeah? And it gave us the possibility of reading in a different perspective, in taking into consideration the context, in taking into consideration the society in different abilities that a person could develop. But when we have here the critical literacy, we also determined that during this process or throughout this process, the culture, the ideology, the knowledge, and the power of each human being, it's important. Because maybe you can read and write the words, but taking into consideration your context, taking into consideration your culture is the perspective that you give to that specific process. Maybe you could interpret a graffiti from your previous knowledge. You could not determine that everybody reads the same phenomena in the same way. Yeah, because it depends on the culture, it depends on the ideology, the knowledge, yes, the previous knowledge that you have for facing this situation. And also, when you are talking about critical literacy, you determined, yeah, that this is used for recognizing that we are reading and writing for looking a more just and equitable world. So here, critical literacy, it is not just reading and writing, it's taking action. It's the praxis. Yes? Yeah, I know that in this moment, the government is trying to apply reform, yeah, here in our country. So what is my role? What is my action? What is my behavior? I am taking action throughout these specific things. Yes? And when we are talking here, because remember that I am introducing these topics for understanding what CDL is and how could we determine and how could we discuss about the CDL principles. So in this way, we could determine that once we have the capacity of understanding what is the ideology, what is the purpose of the author, what is my perception, how I'm going to face that reality, that information, what is my role. Maybe I recognize what is the author writing to a specific population. How are we reading that information? When I have the capacity of discerning the intentions, the ideology of that information, I could be a critical person who determine what is the intention of the word. What is the intention of that word? And that happened a lot, guys. Because, for example, today, talking about that digital literacy and the literacies that we were discussing in a while, we could determine that digital literacy is that way, yes, that way that gave us, or that scenario, that possibility that gave us the possibility of using digital tools, yes, digital scenarios for reading and writing the word in a different formats with different human beings interact, yeah? And in this way, digital literacy gave us the possibility of interacting in a digital space, of reading in a digital space and writing in a digital space. And be careful, because when I am talking here in a digital space, I'm not talking here regarding to the use of internet, for example, uniquely. When you go, for example, to the bank, to the airport, even your cell phone, when you receive information from your cell phone, and when you, for example, are in the airport and you start reading that screen that is in the airport and you receive that information, you take an action. You are reading and taking action. And you need to know how to behave with that information that you are facing. So that is an scenario, an event that you need to know how to behave in that specific things. And due to the increasing of the technological things, the increasing of internet, we are facing, guys, these specific things. The critical digital literacy. Yes, so take a while for reflecting. What is critical literacy? It is reading the word, identifying the principle, the ideologies, the intentions, the power of the message. That is the critical literacy. I'm reading for identifying that specific sense, that specific focus. But also, I'm reading that for taking action. Because if I don't take action, maybe I am reading, I'm writing, but when I take action, maybe I mean, how I'm going to transform myself or my society with this information. That is the specific thing when we are talking about literacy. And also here, when we apply this digital complement, it is because I really want to invite you how to use this critical literacy in digital scenarios, because the place change from physical to digital. Yes, but also when we are facing that screen that I was talking in a while, when we are facing that screen, how could we determine, how could we analyze that message that came to us? Yes, so here I really want to give to you some ideas about what we consider CDL, and also how could we use CDL into the language classroom for empower, transforming, changing, discerning, and of course, sharing with our students the classroom, because the classroom is an scenario for making transformation. The classroom is an scenario for using reading and writing for transform ourselves and our students. The classroom, the English classroom, for example, or the language classroom, is the scenario for analyzing the abuse of power, for analyzing different narratives, for giving our students the possibility of transform themselves, or for giving the possibility to our students to read the word in a different way. And for example, what are we going to, or what are we using nowadays? Digital classrooms or virtual classrooms. So in that way, we need to recognize that the process of reading and writing is not the same in a traditional classroom or in a physical classroom. We need to recognize that maybe we need to update our practices to engage and empower our students throughout these spaces, because the process of reading and writing needs to transform. Yes, so I could say here, critical digital literacy es una forma de reconocer a través de textos digitales cómo la lectura y la escritura van más allá del análisis de las circunstancias históricas, políticas, económicas y culturales que involucran a las personas. La literacidad crítica digital no implica necesariamente mostrar una postura negativa por parte del lector o escritor, sino analizar un tema de diferentes maneras y sugerir posibilidades de cambio y mejora. And this is so very important. I'm going to empower my students for identifying different information and the purpose of that information. But maybe if they consider that the things are going well, if they consider that that information contributes themselves, I could determine and I could follow these practices. And it is not just identifying the negative point of view. Maybe throughout that positive information, we could try and looking for more information that support and continue reshaping and rethinking the process. That is very, very, very important. Aguilera and Pandya said that CDL, it's a combination of several social perspectives on what it means to be literate, what it means to be critical, and what it means to live and learn in a digital age. I really like this part, live and learn in a digital age. Because maybe, are you thinking twice before sharing a meme on your Facebook profile? Are you thinking twice before sharing the information you use in your Instagram profile? Are you inviting to your students to reflect before or discern before or research before the information they are they sharing? Because here, the information is not just a process that comes from the lecturer or the writer to the reader. Now, here, the process of reading and writing are in the same level. And here, that process is a constantly dialogue between the reader and the writer. Because thanks to God, today we have social media for communicating our ideas. Today, we have powerful tools for expressing our narratives and our stories. But please take care, because through that process, we need to reflect about what are we going to transform? What is the intention of sharing that information? How I'm going to use this information? What is my purpose of using that information, of sharing that information? As you know, today, even writing a message offending our president has some consequences that maybe we need to think twice before sharing. Yes? So it's our role as a language teacher to use the the English information, for example, but empower our students in giving them the possibility of sharing that information, to handle that information, manipulating that information, but also giving them the possibility of reflecting about the consequences of the information. So here, reading and writing goes beyond decoding and encoding. Here, reading and writing is a social practice that has some consequences if you don't take care of time of manipulating that information. So how could we use CDL in order to engage our students? Yeah, CDL practices to engage our students with the language process. Here, for example, I really want to invite you to use scenarios to transform students into consumers and critical information producers yes, or critical producers of information. So let's think in this moment, what kind of information or what kind of scenarios could we offer to our students for studying, making and aware and making a, yes, maybe making that scenario a place for consuming information, but also for producing information, because I'm going to show you some examples in a while. Serial practices also contribute to the reflection of the use of digital tools within the classroom to test the context of the students. Yes? So how could we use those digital tools in order to empower our students? And here also, we could determine that throughout these serial practices, we could design communication media to promote students' narratives and counter narratives. Because throughout serial practices, we could empower, transform, reshape the lives of our students. Even we could offer to them the possibility of talking and recognizing that we as a teacher, most of the time, we pretend to talk all the time in the language classroom, but also it's necessary to offer to our students the possibility of expressing themselves. So during this, to understanding these three objectives, for example, I have here 3 specific moments that we could use in order to transform our language classrooms. For example, the creation of digital scenarios for writing and reading the word. We could use social media, Facebook, Instagram, is a scenario for reading and for writing what is happening around us. And maybe it's a scenario for promoting critical sense. Also, we could determine social networks. We could start doing some networks. For example, in LSLP, the project that we are interacting nowadays, we have a social network. Some friends are sharing all the time their perspectives, their point of view, their narratives, their objectives, and through that exercise, we are increasing in generating community. Yes. On the other hand, we have here serial, yeah, reflection of the digital uses for serial purposes. And be careful, because on the net, we need to identify the treasures and the junks on the web. There are meaningful information, but also there are not meaningful information and an irrelevant information. Yes, so our role is trying to use that information, yeah, as a source for determining what is useful or not. Please take into consideration here that it's very important to identify also the student context, because when we gave to our students the possibility of reflecting, or we offered to them maybe the possibility of proposing some specific practices, also we need to take into consideration the student context. And throughout this specific context and throughout this specific situation, we are identifying also the needs of our students. One of the scenarios for promoting the students' narratives, it's the podcasting. For example, throughout the podcasting, you can give to the students a different way of expressing their ideas, because reading and writing, it is not just posting some letters on the paper. I could write my daily life just recording in my cell phone. I could write my life using a blog. So be careful, because here the scenarios for writing and for reading transform or transforming. And we expand the terms. Remember when we were talking about literacies, those scenarios, different scenarios that we are facing nowadays. Yes. So we have different scenarios and opportunities and events for reading and writing our words. I used podcasting for promoting my students' narratives. And I identified that through this practice, my students changed their perspectives, but also shared their ideas among them. And something that calls my attention here that I identify is that through podcasting, my students even develop research skills, because they needed to go to the sources and identify what kind of information was meaningful or not. Yes, so for promoting oral information, I really recommend the podcasting or using into your classrooms, but also the blogging is a scenario, a meaningful scenario for sharing those ideas in more written way, yes, in the reading way. This is a different scenario for promoting the reading and writing process. So, for making some conclusions here, literacy, critical literacy, and critical digital literacy needs to transform. It is not just repeating. It is not just encoding or decoding the information. The transformation is necessary throughout the reading and writing process. Because once you read, you are transforming your perspectives. And also throughout that process, you are empowered yourself because you take action. You are facing the reality in a different perspective. You are facing different phenomena from a different perspective, but also you take action. At the time you share on your social network, or maybe in your Facebook profile, when you shared that ideas is because you are aware about the information you are sharing at that time. And for achieving that goal, for achieving that stage, you need to become in a critical producer and consumer of information. And that is our role as an English teacher or a Portuguese teacher or a language teacher. That is our role. Our role is to empower our students throughout that reading and writing process for identifying the justice, the opportunities, yes, those kind of things that make us more social injustice people. So I really enjoyed to share with you these ideas and for making a summary. It is not just the way of reading and analyzing some graphemes or some letters for determining that we are literate. Yes, so it is the time for discussing, guys. I really enjoyed if you have some ideas and share some perspectives. If this speech give us the possibility of establish conversation right now, and it's everything that I have for today.
I have a question. Can I? Okay.
Yes, we're
Of
going to
course.
start opening
Okay.
like questions.
Is the time for making questions?
Yes, could you start
Okay.
sharing
All
your screen, Edison, so we could see who's talking to us, okay?
Of course.
Okay, so go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, so Claudia and Edison, so as you were saying, I think that promoting these tools in the classroom is the best way so we can kind of like adapt to the current times, which is what's happening currently right now. And I think that all of us as teachers, we should embrace them and celebrate them as well. So I wanted to point out and I wanted to ask you if it's a good idea to start using platforms that are not so commonly used for education, because I would like to introduce them to my students as well, because I think that it could help a lot, such as, I don't know, let me think about like Twitch, Twitch will be a good one, or like vlogging, because you say blogging, but not vlogging with B's, like, like making videos and spread them out on the net. So I think that there's a lot of tools that we can, we can reach out and we can use in our sessions, in our classes. So, but I wanted to ask you if you think, Edison, if it's a good idea to use tools that are mainly dedicated or mainly focusing on I don't know, like just video gaming. What do you think about that? Because I think that the industry, the whole industry of video gaming helps a lot to, with some jargon, with some vocabulary stuff. And of course, with cultural background. So I think it's a good idea to do that. I don't know if you think that is a good idea or not.
Oscar, I really want to invite you first to take into consideration your student context and your student necessities, because your students is going to give you the answer in the question. I mean, maybe I really want to invite you to think twice. Maybe a video game, it's going to contribute to your students' process. All of them have, for example, the capacity of using the video game. Maybe all of them have the tools and the capacity of using this information. When you talk to me about that gaming, yes, and that gamification, that is something that is taking a lot of power nowadays. I could say to you, yes, my friend, use it, please, because it's a very good opportunity for your students to start reading and writing in a different way. Because even throughout the game, they are making some challenges, and they need to use the reading and the writing for achieving the goal. Yes. So for me, if you use the gamification with your students and you have all the resources, all the scenarios, the capacities, do it, my friend. But please don't forget the student context. Don't forget the capacity, or don't forget the context where you are developing the practice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm afraid.
Thanks a lot.
Always is a pleasure. Always is a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Oscar, for your question. I think we continue with Andres, and then I'm not sure if Alejandro and Gloria. I'm not sure about the order. So Andres.
Okay. Good afternoon, or almost good evening to all. No, it always caught my attention something. It is not about the classroom, because I'm not a teacher yet. I'm not working as a teacher, to be honest with you guys. but I'm doing my practicum. But what regarding the previous comments of the teacher, Edison, it caught my attention the way in which people, for example, can like behave in a different way. For example, when it comes to means of transport. For example, the way that we behave in the metro system, for example, when we travel, when you use the metro, or when we, for example, use some behave at the airport, because he was also mentioning the messages, the language that we see in the metro and at the airport. So we behave differently when we see those meanings, right? Those messages. But at some point, we don't do the same when it comes, for example, to the traffic signs, the messages in the city. I mean, there is a contrast between what we do when we see those words, that vocabulary at the metro station, at metro stations, airports, and all other different scenarios, compared to the streets. So what happens in the brain for that to happen, teachers? That's my question.
Well, if you ask me what happened in the brain, I think it's a question for
Claudia.
for Claudia. But I'm going to talk to you, my friend, in terms of that uses, because you are talking about something very special, that is the behavior. No, the interpretation of that symbols, and also how to interact once you understand that interpretation. So it's very important when you are talking, because that is the reading and that is the writing. Once you read, you start making a behavior. Yes, because you understand the symbol. I mean, imagine, Andres, if you are in a car and you don't read the traffic light in red, just because you don't know that language, what could happen in that moment? Andres.
Yeah, no, I'm here. What could happen, for example, if I don't see those like traffic lights or something like that?
Yeah, a digital, what is the digital literacy? It's reading and writing those digital scenarios, yeah?
I could get an accident, for example.
You could get an accident. So if you don't read and write in a perfect way in that time, you could die, my friend. So you need to take care about the things you are reading or about the things you are sharing. That is literacy. It is not just reading, okay, my president is the best president of the world. Not just reading that. It is why are you talking about that? And if you don't take care about your words or about your readings, you could die. Even we were discussing some interesting topic yesterday about literacy of the favela in Brazil. How we need to read that language. And even here in Medellin, with those gangsters, if we don't read, that may be crossing from a neighbor to other, if we don't read that specific context, we could die. So that is the process of reading our city, reading our context. Yes, Andres?
Thank you, Edison. I'm not sure if we continue with Alejandro or with Gloria. I know the order of the other participants. Will you help me? Alejandro, Gloria, who's next?
I don't know. I would like to say something about what Oscar
Gloria.
was asking. So I guess so that we don't lose focus, this would be the moment. That is something like using gamification, not using gamification, using podcasting, not using podcasting. Like, I guess we can ask any question regarding any kind of media, and the answer is going to be the same. To what purpose? Right? Yeah, you can use whatever you want. Like, anything that you bring to the classroom and promotes learning, it's welcome. Now, the question is it going to promote learning? Is it connected to the purpose of the class? Is it going to have an impact? So I don't think the question should be so generalized, like, should we use that? That depends on what you want to do in your class. That depends on what the purpose of your class is, right? If you're just going to turn your classroom into a gamer's heaven and just having them play video games just because of that idea that the games help with English, I'm sorry, they may take hours and hours and hours and they are not going to learn what you want them to learn, right? But they can interact with the game for 10 minutes and that game is giving them the input that they need in order to produce in the language, and that can be really efficient. So that depends on what for. What is it that you want? And then that is going to give you the answer. Like, we cannot give you recipes because every context is different and every group of students is different and they have different needs and they have different interests, right? I don't know if you remember, I have told this story in different classes. When I used Alanis Morissette in one of my classes, when I was working in a school, a student turned and said, "Ay, vallenato en inglés." And that was the end of my class. And that was the end of my class. But in other classes, I can use the same song and be a hit because we could be exploring idioms, we could be exploring things that they are interested on. So we cannot see teaching from a recipe perspective. We have to see teaching from an analysis of the needs and the purposes that we have. And from that perspective, as teachers, in our reflective process, we have to make decisions and say, okay, I think it may work. Let's use it and see what happens. And afterwards, reflect upon it and see if that actually fulfilled the expectation that you had. Or if not, then just look for another strategy.
Yeah, Teach, I think it's because it has been so demonized that people is always against it. Like, I don't understand why that happens, because I don't know, music helps a lot. You know, like he was like Edison was talking about, like all the tools that we can use.
I'm gonna give you an answer, Oscar, because before you go there, and I'm sorry I interrupt you, but I know you, and I know you could talk a lot.
And I have a lot of questions.
It's because we move around stereotypes. There are teachers who use music very efficiently. There are teachers who use movies very efficiently. There are teachers who use games very efficiently. But there are others who use these kinds of things just because they are cool and they want to be the cool teacher. Just because they didn't plan. Just because they didn't plan a class and they need to have the students doing something. And Claudia and I have seen it, right? When we were in that institute that we used to work with in together, that happened, for example, with native speakers. I didn't plan class today, so I'm going to have them watch a movie. That was very common. It was not like once in a million. No, it was very common. So that's why we have the prejudice that they don't work. Because in that way, no way they are going to work.
Thank you, Gloria. Alejandro.
Yeah, thank you, Teach. Thank you.
Are you there, Alejandro? You raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm still here. However, Professor Arboleda literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say like something similar, that we have to, even though we talk a lot about this, we don't do it as often as we should. We don't analyze our context and the needs of our students, and we don't really take those things into account as much as we need. I mean, we keep talking about it every single semester in every single class, but we don't do it as often as we should. And having that into account would also solve the doubt about gaming and music and movies and everything. And the way we teach tends to change if we do so. If we really analyze what we are doing, if we really analyze who are we teaching to, then our ways of teaching need to change. And of course, it'll change every single year, every single semester, every single time that we switch from a class to another, from a group of students to another, it needs to change because we are not teaching the same people. We are maybe not teaching the same topics. So as Professor Abulea said, one thing may work here. If I put music to these students, they are going to work and they are going to do what they have to do efficiently. But in another group, they are just simply going to tell you like, we are going to do this, what for? And the class is over, literally is over. And mostly when you are working with children, because they have no filter telling you that you are not doing anything and they don't like what you are doing. So once they do so, it's over for you as a teacher, at least for that class, because once one of them says that kind of things, all of them are going to follow. So we really need to keep doing this, even though it's sometimes tiring and sometimes it's so redundant, and we think that we already have like a recipe for teaching. We don't have it. We will never have it.
Thank you, Alejandro. Gabriel Gonzalo, I saw your hand.
Okay, hello, good evening, everyone. Okay, I was thinking about what Edison was saying about before, about, okay, use all medias or use Facebook, use the all medias to share the meaningful information from the students, because we have to give the opportunity to our students to express their ideas, okay? But at the same time, I was thinking, okay, what will happen with their parents? Because there is a lot of institutions. I had an experience in which I was in my practicum, in which I was talking about politics, right? So my CT told me, you can't talk about politics in class. And I said, why not? Okay. So it is the opportunity to transform the class into something political, and promote the critical thinking, and promote a critical think about the current situation of our country, right? It is the opportunity to be political, because the education is a political exercise, right? So according to your experience, what you have done about the situation in which there is an institute or a school in which you couldn't promote that critical digital literacy, for example, or to promote the ideas or your students, for example. What is your advice about that?
Gabriel, thank you so much for your question, because it's so interesting when you are talking about when we don't have the capacity of exploring and going beyond our we want to do with our students. Because at the first time, Gabriel, I really recommend you to take care of the institution principles. Yes, because that is something that we need to take into consideration. Maybe, why are we going to buy problems? Yes. Yeah, most of the time we don't need to buy problems. Yes. And in that way, maybe you could determine different strategies for applying that critical sense. Because maybe remember that word that Alvarez said, when I said to you, it is not just promoting negative things. I could engage my students in different practices for developing critical sense, now just in negative things. The critical sense could be positive things. I mean, for example, in the institution, okay, let's go, let's explore the policy of the institution. What do you think? What do you propose? And you could talk today even about the same situation. And maybe what could they propose in order to, I don't know, improve or promoting, that specific information. So my recommendation, Gabriel, for being very specific, is try to read first to analyze your context, try to use and work with the information and the possibilities that you find inside your contest. Yes, but don't buy problems. Just because you're, oh yeah, I really want my students to go tomorrow to the street, to the manifestation. No, you don't need it. Maybe you could look some strategies in order to engage them for being more critical human beings with different information. But that is my recommendation. Don't jump the students' realities and our students' policies.
Thank you, Edison. We have Roger.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Roger.
Hey, thank you very much. So two things. First of all, Gloria, I totally agree with you. You have a new fan. You do have to take into account your context. You have to take into account the possibilities your children have. And I believe in the thing you were saying about the songs and how we teach. It goes like in trends. I've been a teacher since the late 90s, and I've gone through fill in the blanks, then complete, and now it's Kahoot. So I think as teachers, we have to reinvent ourselves and always try to be and fitting into their context, right? There is something I must disagree is that when you promote and when you give them these ideas, let's say about what you were saying about, let's go and fight for our country. We have to understand that they are not from our context. And it's something very sad that happens in Colombia and many other countries. I don't want to sound racist or like a different social class, but many of our students will be or from a different social class from the teachers. I've taught from Comuna 13 to the Columbus School, and I cannot, like, there are some things I cannot mention in one of the schools, whereas the other one, I can definitely mention them. So you do have to be very careful, and this could be a message for the new teachers. When you have a strong feeling, and you're committed to something, let's say Alanis Morissette, for example, I like Michael Jackson. And I remember I would always put Michael Jackson in my classes. So never let your own opinions really reach. Just allow them to know the differences and make them have their hypothesis, make them be critical, but allow them to understand that if they are from a different context, they might feel and think different from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And we're gonna give like Andres the last question for today's session. Andres.
Thank you, teacher. Yeah, here's a more appropriate question for the teacher compared to my first question. So, teacher, Edison. So, for example, how can we control the fact that our students, because we try to do our work when it comes, for example, to teach our students and empower and engage and encourage the students, for example, to better read, better take action when they read, take action when they also write. But how can we control the fact that they get home and they overuse their cell phones, their tablets, so they use those appliances and the parents don't control that? Because some things, it's good that they like get used to using technology and these appliances that we have nowadays, but they maybe overuse it, and the parents, they don't control that. So how can we work with the parents in order to control that so that they can better use those appliances that we have nowadays?
That's an important question, my friend, because obviously we need to determine that even there are some students that they are facing several problems at the time of using technological devices or those kind of things. But I think, Andres, that teaching using the digital tools or technological devices is a conversation between family and institution, because maybe during the classroom or while we are teaching inside the classroom, we could manage, we could have the control of that specific purposes. But when they are at home, I think it's not our role. That is the parents' role to take care of that actions. Yes, what could we do, my friend? We could determine, for example, some activities or some exercises in order to implement or to engage our students for using the cell phone, specifically for academic purposes. We could organize, for example, some tasks for engage our students to that academic purposes. But taking care of that uses outside the classroom, I think is not our job, my friend. Because as I said, this is a conversation between the family and also we as a teachers inside the classroom. And we could organize activities, academic activities for engage our students of reading and writing in a different way for academic purposes. Yes, but in that way, it's not our trouble, my friend, or not our trouble, but maybe we need to engage the parents as well in this business. That is my recommendation.
Thank you. I am not the expert tonight, but I will say that there are a lot of things that we don't control. There are a lot of facts that we don't control. We don't control anybody. Sometimes we maybe possibly control our decisions if we are critical readers. Our job, okay, is to really think about the context of our students and plan an education that allows them to become who they are supposed to become. Okay, thank you, every like participant for like your comments, your questions. You have been amazing today. I want to thank Professors Claudia Suescún and Edison Castrillon for sharing with our alumni, our students, and teachers all these important constructions. We truly believe that communities grow when we talk and work together. And on behalf of Licenciatura en Lenguas Extranjeras con énfasis en Inglés and Coordinación de Graduados and Promoción Empresarial, we thank you for accepting our invitation today. We assure you our commitment to the creation of a true community of practice. Dear viewers and listeners, thank you for your attention. Continue learning and please becoming the teachers we need to change society. Well, I think that this emission is over. Thank you so much, everybody,
Thank you
for your participation.
very much. Thank you, all of you. And my students.